Welcome to the D6 Family Ministry Podcast, a place where ideas, principles, and personalities come together to give you a ministry advantage that empowers the church and home.
I don't know anything more important in our society or in the kingdom of God than to help the church, help the family.
Discipleship is not an event, it's a way of life.
And one day it just hit me that discipleship at home was not about doing more. It was about inviting Christ into what we were already doing.
The goal of family ministry is not families sitting on the couch holding hands and singing Kumbaya. The ultimate goal is families that love God, love people, and make disciples of all peoples.
So that's why you're here. You're here to say 1 hour a week, as significant and as awesome as it is, we know that it's not enough, and we want to be intentional with every hour.
You're listening to the D6 Podcast. Here are your hosts, Marianne Howard, Ron Hunter, and Josh Wooten.
You ever notice that you get this one car you think is really special, and then when you start driving it, you realize it's not really special. Everybody else has it in the whole world. Do you...
Yes.
Yes. I wish I had that feeling with a Jeep, if I can be completely honest. Because
really?
I want one so bad, and I see them everywhere. We rented one on Turo for like a little vacation trip in the mountains, and it was wild. I felt like, as soon as I started driving one, just for a week, I saw them everywhere, and now I notice them everywhere. I just want one. I'm jealous of both of you.
They are all over the mountains. Like when we go over to Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg, they're everywhere.
Yeah, they're everywhere in our town. We're in the Jeep Wrangler Club, and it is this really special. We didn't realize it till Chad got his first Jeep. We're on our third Jeep, and when he first got his first Jeep, he got home and he said, "Babe, random strangers are waving at me." The Jeep wave, and he didn't know about it. And so then we Googled it, and he was like, "I'm supposed to be giving the Jeep wave, and I'm doing it on the video. Our listeners cannot see this, but yes. I'm giving Ron the Jeep wave."
And I'm giving it back because I too drive a Jeep Wrangler, and it is, and you're I always wonder, do I miss the Jeep? Do you feel this way, Marion? I miss the Jeep wave. And because whenever I'm throwing it up and somebody else isn't aware of it, I'm like, man, you're being a snob. You didn't wave back at me, because I don't think everybody knows it, but I would say 75% of the people know it.
Yes. And it's so ingrained in Chad that when he's driving my mom Pathfinder, he's giving the Jeep wave from a Pathfinder.
I hear you. I'm the same way because I'm on the road a lot and I'm in a rental car and I'm wanting so bad to give the Jeep wave. And I'm like, dude, I'm in this nothing thing, driving around because, it is so funny. And what about ducks? Josh, are you hear the ducks?
No, I am into struggling with the 10th commandment. Thou shalt not covet thy brother's Jeep.
Oh my goodness. So have you been ducked, Marianne? Has Chad been ducked?
Many times we come out of random locations and he just got a red one. He just got a red duck. Yep. Which is really unique, but he's got several ducks. He's got pink ones, red ones, and he went and bought ducks because he was like, I think this is another community thing. And so he went and got ducks, and he put a verse on the bottom of the duck because he wanted to be kind of strategic about giving ducks with some sort of truth on it. So he gives out ducks with scripture on them.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. For our listeners, if you're not aware, just go ahead and Google Jeep duck. And there's plenty of videos out there that'll tell you what this thing is about. But basically, a duck is meant to say, hey, I think your Jeep is cool. And you leave it on either the door handle or the hood or someplace prominent. And, you will see some Jeeps, they will collect them. Now, I have turned around, every time I get a duck, I've turned around and given it away. I have my own ducks, so I'm not like the collector of them. That's just not in my wheelhouse. But some people collect and keep every one they've gotten.
Oh, I've seen them. And I'm telling you, the customization, this is a total sales pitch for Jeep Wranglers, but the customization on some of these Jeeps that I see, and I'm going to tell you guys another car really quick before we get into this interview, is that I'm like, want so bad is the new Bronco, the Outer Banks Bronco. Oh my goodness gracious.
Yes. It is
love it.
sharp. I read a lot of articles comparing the two. I'm still super satisfied with my Jeep decision. Sorry, Ford. But
Yeah,
yeah,
Chad's a Jeep guy.
yeah, yeah. I
For
love
sure.
it. So Josh is over here on Carvana right now, searching all the Jeep inventory within 700 miles of Nashville.
I am very thankful that the Lord has blessed both of you with an incredible Jeep, and that is all I'm going to say at this time.
Well, I tell you what, for Josh's mental health and sinful health, we better jump into this interview. And we did this sort of light because this is a bit of a heavier interview, and our guest is Rachel Timothy, and she talks a little bit about cars. And our idea is, maybe you're sitting there going, man, I had no idea there was a Jeep world. I had no idea there was ducking involved in Jeeps or the Jeep Wave. Well, we suspect that you might not be aware of some other things happening right around you. Yes. And you need to be aware. And Rachel's going to bring some personal experience into this and some awareness for all of us to consider. So sit back, take this in, and we'll discuss it on the other side.
Registration for D6 2023 is now open. For a limited time, you can take advantage of the absolute best pricing for the D6 conference if you register now. The earlier you register, the more you save. Last year's conference sold out, so don't wait long to take advantage of this offer. Join us for the 2023 D6 conference, April 10th to 12th at the Marriott World Center in Orlando, Florida. This year's theme is all in, all your heart, all your soul, all your strength. Register now at d6conference.com.
We are live from the D6 conference, and I'm joined by Miss Rachel Timothy. Rachel's trafficking story began at age 9 and lasted several years. She's now married with 4 amazing kids and has written a book called Open Blind Eyes, explaining how the dark world of trafficking can go unnoticed in our communities and how God brought her through this journey. Rachel is passionate about working in the fight against trafficking. Rachel is actually a friend of mine who has joined us in Bible study for the last couple of years, and I'm so thrilled that you're here with me today, Rachel.
Aw, thank you. I appreciate you.
Can I also say, as your friend, I'm very proud that you're having this conversation. Unfortunately, this is not one that many churches are having. And
Correct.
So I'm thrilled that you are being bold and brave enough to do this, speaking on behalf of thousands.
Thank
unfortunately.
you. Yeah.
So I'm very proud that you're here and doing this today.
It says a lot about D6 too, to allow me to speak about it. So I appreciate it.
I think so. And it's a very sensitive subject. But I think that's all the more reason to have this conversation today. So tell us a little bit why you're passionate about this topic of trafficking.
Yeah, sure. So, it hits me near and dear because it impacted me from the age of 9. And a lot of people think of sex trafficking as something that is overseas or it's somebody who is kidnapped and never seen again. But in actuality, sex trafficking is happening right in front of us. It's happening to our kids in schools. It's happening in youth groups and churches. It's happening in teams and neighborhoods. And it's very similar to just regular abuse, but there's something monetary that's gained from it. So whether it's child porn, or it could be, parents will sell their children on the weekend just so they can have a little extra money. My situation was, it was a coach, and he groomed me for about 6 months until it eventually led to abuse, and then he tricked me into letting him take pictures, which led to nude photographs, and then selling me to other people. So it was a process, and it seems that whole grooming process is used by many predators. They don't reinvent the wheel each time. It's the same type of special treatment, special privileges. And another another thing that people don't commonly know is they think somebody who's trafficked hates their trafficker, but oftentimes they're so brainwashed and groomed that they love their trafficker. They think they love their trafficker and they want to protect them. And so they're silent, and they live in that silence for years. And so that's something that I lived with. I lived with the silence. I lived with the flashbacks and the nightmares and all of that. And, I was a part of a Christian family. My dad was a preacher, and they often used that and the shame and the Bible to get me to do things I would never have done otherwise. And as I've gotten older and I've met a lot of other survivors, my story is not uncommon, and they say that 55% of child trafficking victims still go to school. They're still living at home. It's just hidden with everybody around them. And so it's something I'm passionate to tell others about so they can see the signs and so they can help these kids and help these victims and hopefully give them a voice.
So if we were live right now, like in front of an audience, I would be silent for a moment. I think people need to hear that. I think people need to hear that this is actually happening. Yeah. And if we're being ignorant to it, it's because we're turning our face away from it. If you think it's not happening around you, you're just ignoring it.
Yes.
So press pause, listener, if you need to, or rewind and listen again to what Rachel just said. Because it's happening, and I think you're exactly right. We think like, oh, that's happening in third world countries, or that's happening across the world. It's not happening in my backyard. And with 55% of kids and people still going on about their lives. Do you have any other statistics that you can share with us right now?
Yeah, I mean, if you're thinking it's not in America, let me tell you that America is the #1 consumer and creator of child pornography in the world. And it's coming at rapid rates with COVID hitting when it did, and these people are putting child porn out there left and right, and that's trafficking. I mean, even though they are not physically being sold to somebody, their picture is, their video is, that is trafficking, and it's happening all the time. Often our youth is tricked by people online as well. Almost every one of our youth will be somehow approached online by a trafficker, pretending to be somebody else, trying to trick them into sending, even if they just send information, like they say, oh yeah, I got a little sister. Well, the next time they talk, that trafficker might threaten and say, well, I'm going to hurt your little sister if you don't send me a picture. And a 10-year-old little girl is going to be like, oh my goodness, I guess I have to. And just like that, they're caught in a trap. And that is trafficking. And it's happening within your home. And you don't realize it.
So then how can we prepare our kids for that? How can we have conversations now to say, hey, listen, not everyone's a good guy,
Yes,
And
exactly.
if you hear these things, if you start to suspect something, if something sounds weird, like how can we have those conversations and equip them for that?
Yeah. Well, one thing I'd like to say is predators often will boldly state that Christians are the easiest to trick, that Christian kids are the easiest to groom because they're taught, obey your elders. They are able to twist Scripture, and these kids believe Scripture. They believe God, or they are shamed into doing something or staying quiet. And so as Christian families, we need to equip our kids that nobody's above the law. Even if it's somebody who is of authority who has hurt you, they're not above the law. We need to equip our kids that no matter what they say, we will believe them, even if it doesn't make sense. When I first tried to come out as a kid and I told people I was being hurt, I couldn't give you the A to Z details of what had happened. I was a kid. I mean, I'd gone through blackout moments of when the abuse was, that's how you protect yourself when it's going on. And so to verbalize things that I didn't have a vocabulary for, it's just not possible. And so I didn't have the words to express it, but that doesn't mean nothing happened. And so when you're talking to your kids, believe them. Even if what they say sounds way off the wall, something's going on, and get to the bottom of it. Also, I always like to say, you can ask your kids, has anybody ever hurt you? But go beyond that, because I would have said no. But if somebody would have asked me, does anybody make you feel special? Is there anybody that spends a lot of time with you? Somebody who gives you special gifts? That can give you a door to see, is there somebody who's spending extra time with my kid that maybe has ulterior motives?
Yeah. Can I ask, how did the loving adults in your life respond when you told them when you were young?
When I was young, I was told that I was attention-seeking, and it wasn't true. Now, this is another thing that's dear to my heart, because as Christians, we often want to act like we have it all together. And I think that was part of it. We didn't want to go there. And that only causes more trauma to the victim. So yeah, it was difficult.
How do you think that impacts how victims see the church? Is this impacting the church at all?
Oh, greatly. I would like to say this statistic. They say that 98% of people who come forward, they're telling the truth, but only 1 in 3 adults will actually believe what they're saying. And that breaks my heart. And perpetrators will tell the victims they're not going to believe you. And then whenever they really don't, when the church really doesn't believe them, you never want to speak up about it again. You think it's your fault.
Right.
And so does it impact the church? Absolutely, but only if the church opens their eyes to see what's actually happening in front of them. I feel like we need to hold the people accountable who are the perpetrators. We need to hold the people accountable who are enablers, but also the ones who stay silent.
You're right. This is great stuff, having this conversation with Rachel Timothy. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Did you know that because of D6 Heroes, Randall House and D6 Family are able to equip families far and wide in the area of generational discipleship? Due to the financial gifts of both individuals and churches, D6 curriculum has been translated into multiple languages and distributed across the globe, including restricted access countries for use in the underground church. In short, because of the financial gifts of individuals like you, moms and dads all over the world can pass their faith to the next generation of believers. Would you consider becoming a D6 hero? A D6 hero is an individual who invests their financial resources in the ministry of Randall House and D6 Family to ensure that believers can transfer their faith through the church and home. Please visit d6hero.com to join the ranks of our heroes and to explore other areas where your financial investment can have an impact.
We're talking about sex trafficking. We're talking about how it's infiltrating our neighborhoods, our schools, and ultimately our churches. And the impact of Rachel's story. I'm so glad, again, that you are just being so brave. But if we are thinking it's not happening, we're just being ignorant. So how can we talk to church leaders? How can we talk to parents? What are some things that we can look for to see this happening around us?
Well, so for example, we recently got a new car, and it's a silver Chrysler van, okay? And I hadn't seen hardly any of those until we bought one, and now I see them everywhere. And it's like, okay, no. It wasn't that they weren't there before, it's that I didn't have my eyes open to them. So as a church, we need to be talking about abuse. We need to be talking about sex trafficking. We need to be talking about predators, even within our church, because once we do, our eyes will become open to what's actually going on around us. Some churches believe it's almost taboo to talk about because if you talk about abuse, then it's going to be there. Well, it's not that it wasn't there to start with, but we need to be there for the victims. I think it's very important that we open our eyes to the fact that there are wolves in sheep's clothing hiding in our congregations, and we need to stop denying that. I've had the chance to get to share my story many times now, and so many women have come forward to me and said, I went to my church leadership and I told them there's a man in this church who sexually abused me when I was a kid. And they go to this person and the accused denies it, and then the church tells the victim, you need to forget it ever happened. You need to move on, turn the other cheek, and forgive.
So the church in and of itself isn't handling it well.
Yeah. And I want to say, God never said for a sheep to turn the other cheek to a wolf. Like, a sheep turn the other cheek to a sheep. Like, you stay far from wolves. Shepherd is there to keep the wolves out of the flock. And that's what we need to do as a church. We need to be in discernment and prayer and ask the Holy Spirit to give us guidance as far as wolves in sheep's clothing. Be very careful as who you hire as leaders, because they are purposefully seeking out those leadership roles because they can abuse that authority and destroy your children and your church as a result. So, there's a website that I really enjoy looking at. It's called notinourchurch.com, and it gives lots of policies that churches can look into. It gives advice and tips on how to protect your sheep, your flock, from predators. And another thing I'm passionate about is the fact that, 1 in 4 women experience some sort of trauma in their life, and it's like 1 in 6 boys. So when you look at your congregation and you think of those statistics, and then you think how trauma impacts a person's life, and oftentimes it leads to sinful coping skills, ways to try to make the pain stop, and they dive into this because they need something to stop the pain. Mm-hmm. Well, as a church, we need to fill that gap. We need to be able to teach our congregation abuse is not a taboo word. Let's talk about it, and let's talk about how life happens after trauma, not to just deal with the impact of it, but heal from the impact of it.
Yeah. And with the statistic that you just shared, the likelihood of someone being bold enough to come forward with that,
yes,
it's probably going to be true.
Yes.
that it actually happened.
Yes, because you put a scarlet letter on you when you come forward. I mean, you're risking being shamed, you're risking not being believed, and oftentimes, I know for me anyway, it had very little to do with the person I was accusing. I was drowning. And I needed help, and that was why I came forward. Now, I didn't want him around other kids,
right?
But it wasn't about, I want to get him in trouble. I needed help, and that's often the case for victims.
Yeah, so how do we help them? How do we help those victims? If someone comes to me and says, hey, this is what's going on or what has been going on, what do I do? What do I do next?
Well, you have the first part down for sure. You're open and easy to trust and easy to talk to. And I think having relationships with all sorts of people is the start, because then as you gain that trust from people, they're going to be willing to share the hard stuff. And you're going to be able to see when something changes in their life or if they're struggling, and you can kind of ask questions. But then the next step is, I know for me, I had somebody who stepped in and they fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. They loved me when I hated myself. They were literally the hands and feet of Jesus. And this lady has never left me. She's gone with me to police stations, to counseling sessions. I mean, she's been my rock. And for a long time, I had to borrow her faith almost. Like, I trusted her, and her faith and trust was in God. And so I was able to almost borrow that faith until I was able to see God in a new way, and then it became my own. Yeah. But being that in between, loving them, being that Jesus to them, that's how you're going to help them the most.
So if you're the person listening who says, okay, now that my eyes are open to this, I know the things I need to be looking for, the behaviors that I can see. How can I help? How can I aid in rescuing these people and looking for these? What are some resources or ministries that you would point them to say, hey, you need to get plugged in here.
Yeah.
These people are actually helping.
Yeah, so think about your gifts. Think about the ways that God uses you the best. And there's several different organizations. I would mention my own is Open Blind Eyes Ministries. And so I'm wanting to speak and raise awareness, not just on sex trafficking, but life after trauma. So if you're interested in a workshop, coming to your church, speaking to your youth group, there's been so many times that when I've shared my story, then a lot of people have then shared their own and things they weren't able to share before. So that's a portion of it. Guardians Rising, if you go to guardiansrising.org, they're working on rescuing and investigating and helping with aftercare and being kind of the people on the ground, doing the groundwork for survivors, for victims, really, who are still in it. And then another organization I'm working with is called Stop SIS, and SIS stands for Suffering in Silence. And we're doing a program for trauma survivors to help get them out of that stuck zone. You know, trauma just makes you feel like there's no future, and we want to change that.
There is, right?
There is,
yeah.
And God has showed me that, and I've done this program, and it's changed my life. And so I want to pass that on to others, and we have one that's just for trauma survivors. But then just workshops, how to train the church, how to train people at work. I'm doing a I'm speaking at a high school this next week, and things like that. It gives me purpose for my pain, and hopefully will help others have their eyes opened as well.
Well, that's awesome. Friends who are listening, please lean into this conversation. Let's not ignore this as the church. This is a point where we can rise up and make a difference in the lives of these people. Be on the lookout. Check out these resources. Rachel, thank you so much. Again, I'm so proud of you. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you. I enjoyed being here.
Well, I just want to say thank you, Rachel, for your transparency. And you brought some things to light that I haven't even considered, and honestly, um, challenged me and to see. And, you're so right. There are things going on right around us. I think my biggest takeaway as a mother, and I'd love for us to talk about it. The biggest thing was when she was talking about, when you're talking to your children and you're asking questions, don't always ask the given question of, is there anyone hurting you? She said, other good questions to consider, and it's in the conversation of grooming, is, does anyone make you feel special or give you special gifts? And guys, I loved that as a mom.
Yeah.
I was like, I've never been equipped with that. And so that really helped me. I've already used that with my child since this interview. What did you guys think about that question, and just how that helps parents and families as they're discipling their children in this area?
Well, I think it goes with, you have to trust your gut as a mom and dad, and so often we miss it. Unfortunately, I have experienced within our church community here locally something, that happened that in my gut, I thought something is off with this person in this situation. But then I thought, am I judging them? Am I, being too hypercritical or whatnot? And then months later, something came out. And I just went, oh, wow. And I'd heard murmurings from people, but I think it points back to, what she said, that 98% of the time when somebody comes forth with an accusation or a story, that 98% of the time it's true. But on the flip side of that, only 1 in 3 believes. So it's 98% to 33% that actually believe the claim. It's a lopsided fraction. And so I think we really need to pay attention to what people are saying when accusations like that or situations arise, that we take them seriously, and that we realize that it's very likely true versus very likely not true, at least according to those statistics.
That's right. And when our kids raise that red flag, we've got to explore it regardless of the relationships involved. It doesn't matter if there's a family member, a key church member, or whatever. She talks through that and what that does if we do not approach that in the right manner, looking, investigating, calling it out. And if you're innocent in this, you don't mind if people look at your life. You don't mind if people ask the hard questions in here. Here's a question I'm curious of. She didn't address, and I've often wondered, because she mentioned this is a tactic that predators or people grooming a child will use is, hey, if you don't do this, I'm going to hurt your siblings or hurt your family. I've often thought that the appropriate question, in addition to what she's asked, and, has anybody touched you inappropriately? And we've had those kinds of conversations. I've often wanted to, and I didn't do this with our kids. We had all the normal talks with them. But for our grandkids, I want to make sure, is anybody threatening your family? Have you ever felt like they've threatened your family or somebody you love to get you to do something? And again, if we're close to people, I think we can see things register in their eyes immediately upon asking such tough questions. How do you feel about that question, Josh or Marianne? Is that a good or a bad question? I'm not sure. I'm still weighing it out.
I think it's a necessary question. And one other element that she didn't discuss on the podcast, but I think this is something we need to be vigilant of as parents, is there's a digital world that our kids are engaged in. And so I think this narrative was very coach, personal engagement teacher, those kinds of things. But I'm just telling you, we're now, there's a shift happening in culture, and our kids' closest friends possibly are online, or the people that our kids are engaging are online. And so those questions apply even online. So I love that, because a threat can come digitally.
Yeah.
You may not get a gift from a digital grooming, but you will definitely get a threat from a digital groom.
Yes.
And so I think we've got to be vigilant both digitally and in who is speaking into your children's lives. And the other thing that she exposed is, as churches, we've got to be very vigilant in setting up systems to keep the sheep safe.
Yes. The wolves are everywhere, and we have, thankfully security has gotten more tightened up across the board in churches everywhere, and we have, of course, we utilize a system through Planning Center to check in with security codes, and if you don't have the tag, you're not getting the child. And I've had more parents upset at me, and my line is, I would rather have you be upset and a little agitated at me for trying to protect your children than you being a little upset or majorly upset at me for me releasing them to somebody I'm not supposed to. And I hope that you realize that these safeguards are to protect your child. And most of the time they will understand that. And if they don't, that's okay. My job is as a shepherd to protect the sheep, just like you said, Marianne.
What are some of the, services and resources? She listed a couple in her podcast, but we all work, in the church world. What are some resources and services to help protect churches, large or small? What are some that you guys are using?
I'll give you one that D6 Family Ministry uses, because we do interact with minors on a regular basis. Everybody thinks of D6 as the D6 conference and adults are attending. But we have another major conference that we hold that's even bigger than D6 every July. And we have teenagers, we have middle schoolers, we have children, and we have preschoolers. And we have services for all four of those age groups. And we have leaders and, the appropriate ratio, volunteering, leaning in, participating in all of those areas of worship, service projects, activities. Therefore, they have to be vetted, researched, and we use Plan to Protect. And I'll give you one of the advantages that Plan to Protect does. There are databases, and most people think, hey, I did a quick search on this one database, our person's good. Well, there are multiple databases inside of each state, and you need a service that aggregates or pulls together every major database in the nation and in the various states in one search. And that's one of the reasons why we use Plan to Protect. And let's say that you're doing an outing with your youth program and you cross a state line, there's a different set of state laws for how things have to be reported. And the Plan to Protect app will give you the guidelines, whether or not you're in your own state or an adjoining state or somewhere else on a missions trip.
What I also love about that Plan to Protect, Ron, is because when I started working with you guys in that summer conference that you do, it's not just filling out an application. You actually have to watch videos and answer questions on the backside of these videos, so everyone is being educated on what to look for. Signs that there may be a child in danger or has experienced some type of abuse, different behaviors to look for, the signs to keep your eyes out for it. And I love that it's not only just we're going to background check you and make sure you're good, but we're wanting to empower you and teach you how to best care for these kids and what to look out for.
And it's annual, by the way, too. So even though you've been through it once, you have to do the annual certification. Marianne?
We have a similar tool here in the Dallas area. All three churches that we've worked with and been connected with has had used Ministry Safe. And similar to Plan to Protect, it came about by two lawyers who, which I love that, because they handled domestic and law within family and things like that. And so just like Plan to Protect, there's videos, there's training. You have to be Ministry Safe certified to be able to go to certain camps and be around minors. And anyway, I just think that is very, very important, that when families are bringing their children to the church, that they know that their children are safe. I think we need to over communicate safety.
Yes, we do. I often find, and Rachel said this in her interview, predators can prey on Christians because we're trusting. We assume that the image that we see online contacting us is what that person looks like and is. And we're easy targets because we are assuming of the good in people generally. And small churches have a similar mentality. Well, we've been to church with them our whole lives, or we know them. It will be insulting to ask them to go through it. I'm just going to tell you what Josh said earlier. I'd rather them be a little upset and protect our kids. Because if we have nothing to hide, we have no problem going through this process. And so whether you're a small church or a large church, all of these plans are proportional in cost to your size. And it is very affordable, and it's much cheaper than the mess you'll find yourself in if you do not do this. So please talk about these, put in these safeguards, have the questions with your kids and your grandkids, and talk through these areas. Thank you. What Marianne said, Rachel, thank you for bringing this subject to us. It's a difficult one, but it's a needed one. Next week, we're going to take a walk through the wilderness. Another tough area, but a needed area. Brian Haynes is going to talk through his brand new book, The War in the Wilderness. The War in the Wilderness. And man, can he bring it, can he not?
Yes.
Okay. Until
you
then,
don't want to miss this one.
There we go. Until then, be aware. Give the Jeep wave, but put on your parent eyes, your grandparent eyes, your ministry leader eyes, and be aware of other things out there besides just vehicles. We love you guys. We appreciate you listening. Take care.
You've been listening to the D6 Podcast. You can learn more about D6 at d6family.com.